Good evening and welcome once again. Tonight we journey into the spellbinding world of Greek mythology. Make yourself comfortable, relax, and let us begin. In the beginning there was neither Olympus, nor earth, nor sea, nor sky. There was only chaos. But this was not the chaos described today. Disorder, confusion, madness, those came later. Chaos was a yawning void, an abyss without shape or direction. It was neither evil nor good, not even neutral. It simply was. From this ancient emptiness emerged the first glimmers of being. Gaia, the earth, vast and unyielding. Tartarus, the chasm beneath the ground, dark and terrible. And Eros, the force of love and desire, the binding thread of all future creation. These were not yet gods as we know them, but primal essences taking form. Then came Nyx, the night, cloaked in a shadow so deep that even chaos recoiled. After her appeared Erebus, the darkness of the underworld, her companion in the stillness of time's dawn. From their union were born Aether, the pure upper air that gods would breathe, and Hemera, the day forever fated to chase her mother across the heavens. Thus began the cycle of night and day, not through science, but through myth, through a family of unseen titans, kindling and dimming the sky with every passing hour. Gaia, the earth herself, did not lie idle. She was patient and fertile, and from her body she brought forth Uranus, the starry, endless sky. He became both her son and her consort. When he stretched above her, covering the heavens, the world took its first shape, a dome of sky above the broad plain. Gaia also bore the mountains, wild and high, and Pontus, the sea, restless with its own will, long before ships sailed its waves or sea monsters stirred its depths. Earth and sky became the first great pair, and their union produced the Titans, the first generation of mighty beings who ruled the cosmos long before Zeus and his kin. There were 12 of them, 6 sons and 6 daughters, each majestic and filled with elemental power. Oceanus, the river encircling the world. Hyperion, the lord of light. Coeus, the seeker of truth. Creus, the bearer of constellations. Iapetus, the forefather of humankind. And Cronus, the youngest and shrewdest. Among the daughters were Thea, the radiant mother of sun and moon. Rhea, the future mother of gods. Themis, divine law. Mnemosyne, keeper of memory. Phoebe, the shining one. And Tethys, the nourishing sea. Yet her womb was not exhausted. She gave birth also to monstrous children, full of might and dread. The first were the Cyclopes, Brontes, Steropes, and Arges. Each bore a single eye, blazing in their forehead like a smith's fire. They were forgers of thunderbolts, strong and plain, fearing neither gods nor giants. Then came the Hecatonchires, 100-handed ones, enormous and terrifying, each with 50 heads and 100 arms, able to shake the very foundations of the world when seized by rage. Uranus, lord of the sky, trembled at the sight of these monstrous children. Ashamed and fearful of their strength, he hurled them back into Gaia's womb, into the depths of the earth, and sealed them away, hidden beneath layers of stone and sorrow. Gaia groaned beneath their weight. Once proud and fruitful, the earth now labored with every breath. In that pain, she began to scheme. But that is a tale for another day. remember only this: in the oldest age, before law and justice, before sword and plow, the world was shaped not by hands, but by force, by union, and by grief. Chaos gave rise to the first forms, but it was Gaia, the Great Mother, who gave them ground to stand upon. The union of Gaia and Uranus, earth and sky, became the first great marriage of the cosmos. It was no wedding at an altar, no bond witnessed, but a necessity of nature. The sky stretched over the earth, embracing her, pressing down each night with his starry body. From this union came the Titans and other mighty offspring, but also a deep sorrow. Uranus, proud and boundless, was a jealous and fearful father. In Gaia's monstrous children, he saw not strength, but a threat to his rule. He looked upon the Cyclops and the hundred-handed with revulsion, not wonder. And in swift, cruel judgment, he thrust them back into Gaia's womb, into the earth's depths, where there was neither light nor voice. Gaia moaned beneath their weight. It was not only a crushing burden, but the betrayal of a husband, the sky, who should have loved their children as she did. Night after night, Uranus descended upon her, pressing the heavens to the earth, blind to her pain and deaf to her grief. She could bear it no longer. So from her own flesh she forged a weapon, not of bronze or iron, which did not yet exist, but of flint, sharp as vengeance and merciless as truth. She went to her Titan sons, the eldest and strongest, and spoke to them of her torment. "Your father has wronged me," she said. "He has chained your brothers. He has silenced my womb. Which of you will aid me?" One by one they turned away, afraid of their father's might. Only Cronus, the youngest, the cunning one, with keen eyes and patient heart, stepped forward. "I will do it," he said. "Give me the blade." And Gaia prepared the snare. She waited until Uranus, as always, descended to lie upon her in the dark. Then Cronus leapt from the shadows. With steady hand, without hesitation, he brought down the sickle upon his father. The sky shuddered with Uranus's cry as the blade severed the source of his power. Cronus flung the bloody flesh into the sea, and from the crimson foam rising upon the waves, something new emerged, a figure of unimaginable beauty, at once dreadful and irresistible. From the white foam stepped Aphrodite, goddess of love and desire, who one day would topple kings and ignite empires. She touched the shore of Cyprus, radiant and serene, untouched by the savagery of her birth. But Gaia's vengeance did not end with blood. From the drops that fell upon the earth arose the Hellenes, dark avengers who hound oath-breakers and kinslayers to the end of time. Giants appeared, destined to rise against the gods, and the Meleae, ash-tree nymphs, guardians of wild nature and ancient paths. Uranus, wounded and overthrown, vanished into the heavens, leaving the world to his children. Before his flight, it is said, he spoke one last curse, a tolling that would echo through the ages. "As I have fallen by the hand of my son, so shall he fall by the hand of his own." It was not merely his prophecy, but a truth Gaia had already whispered, and Cronus had heard it. He ascended the throne of the heavens and wrapped himself in power. But from the moment he claimed it, fear took root in his heart, the fear of his father's words. Thus ended the reign of Uranus, first king of the cosmos, and began the age of the Titans. Yet already within the womb of time, a new storm gathered. With Uranus cast down, and the heavens no longer weighing so heavily upon the earth, the world breathed freely. The Titans, freed from their father's yoke, stood tall beneath the sky. And Cronus, youngest and shrewdest, declared himself master of all. He was not a god of chaos or cruelty as his father had become, but ruled with a cautious and suspicious heart. The sickle with which he struck down Uranus remained hidden, buried in the earth or cast into the sea. It was remembered but unseen, like a secret sin. Cronus had freed his mother from torment and his brothers from chains. Yet from the instant he sat upon the throne, his mind was haunted by his father's curse. The dying words of Uranus beat within him like a second heart. He too would fall by the hand of his own. And Cronus took a wife, as befits a king. He chose Rhea, his sister, a titaness of gentle strength and deep wisdom, whose name would one day be spoken with sorrow. Together they ruled in an age poets later called the Golden Age. It was a time when humankind, newly formed, lived in peace, knowing neither suffering nor war, when fruit ripened without labor and winter had no dominion. It was an age before kings gathered armies, before men raised walls or built temples. Justice walked unseen among them, and no one locked their doors. But such a world, as always, could not last forever. In time, Rhea began to bear children, and each time Cronus remembered his father's curse. He did not hesitate. Whenever Rhea placed a newborn in his hands, first Hestia, then Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, he opened wide his mouth and swallowed them whole. There was no cry, no cradle left, only the knowledge they were gone, hidden within their father's belly, like seeds in winter soil. Cronus told Rhea it must be so, that he would not endure Uranus's fate, that the throne must be guarded. Rhea, though proud and strong, was powerless before him. She wept, but her tears changed nothing. 5 times she gave birth, and 5 times she lost her children, devoured by her husband's fear. But the 6th time she resolved. When the child stirred within her, she did not go to Cronus. She fled to the island of Crete, where mountains touch the sky and deep caves open. There, among shepherds and nymphs, she gave birth to her youngest son, Zeus. From the moment of his birth, Rhea knew he was different. His cry shook the trees. His eyes opened before his first breath. And when he grasped her finger, he held it with the strength of destiny itself. To deceive Cronus, Rhea wrapped a stone in swaddling cloths, and with trembling hands placed it in her husband's arms. He swallowed it greedily, believing the danger gone. And in the hidden heart of Mount Ida, the infant Zeus was secretly nourished. He was guarded by the Curetes, warriors who danced and clashed their shields to drown his cries, while the goat Amalthea nursed him, her milk filling him with boundless strength. And Zeus grew, and with him grew the storm that would one day shatter the world. But for now the age of Cronus endured. The sky towered high, the earth lay green, and the Titans reigned from their thrones, unaware of the storm to come. Yet within Cronus's belly stirred 5 children, and far to the west the secret-born child gazed at the stars and waited. In the veiled folds of Mount Ida, where the air is clear and the wind whispers ancient names through stone and pine, Zeus came of age. Raised in secret, far from his father's eye, he learned the world not from scrolls or teachings, but in the silence of high mountains, in the rustle of leaves, and in the hushed tales his guardians shared by the fire. He drank the milk of the divine goat Amalthea, who had nursed him from birth. From her broken horn, whether by chance or by fate's sign, was born the cornucopia, the horn of plenty, symbol of eternal abundance. When Amalthea died, Zeus lifted her hide to the stars in her honor, and her memory became part of the very sky he was destined to rule. Yet he was not born for solitude, nor only for gazing at the heavens. His blood ran heavy with prophecy. His bones bore the weight of an uprising yet to come. When he reached his strength, Gaia herself began to stir. She remembered Cronus's betrayal, the torment of her sons, the hundred-handed and the Cyclopes, cast down into Tartarus. Her vengeance had not ended with Uranus. It had merely been delayed. With words as old as stone, she whispered truths into Zeus's dreams. Awake, she guided his steps. First, she led him to Metis, goddess of wisdom, whose counsel was sharp and whose loyalty stretched far into the future. With her aid, Zeus devised his plan. To challenge Cronus, king of the Titans and of time, was not a matter of brute force, but of cunning. Zeus returned in disguise, a wanderer in his father's hall, and there, by Metis's craft, offered Cronus wine laced with a potion, bitter-sweet and thick as honey. The draught churned the Titan's belly, and at last, with groans and trembling, Cronus disgorged the children he had swallowed long ago. Yet they emerged not as infants, but full-grown and radiant, clothed in the power of gods, reborn into a world now braced for war. First came Hestia, keeper of the hearth, then Demeter, goddess of the grain, next proud, watchful Hera, Hades, lord of the dead, and finally Poseidon, master of the deep. For the first time, 6 siblings stood together, their eyes set upon the throne that had condemned them to darkness. They had not forgotten. But Cronus was not alone. The Titans rallied to him. Brothers and sisters gathered upon Mount Olympus, the ancient throne of the south. Only Oceanus held apart, whether too wise or too weary for bloody strife. The rest, Coeus, Crius, Hyperion, and Iapetus, raised their arms. Thus began the war the poets named the Titanomachy, the clash of Titans and Olympians, a war that tore the heavens and split the earth to its very core. For 10 years the battle raged without end. The sky blackened with storm and smoke. Thunder and fire roared over mountains, while the young world shuddered as its rulers fought for the right to reign. The Titans held Olympus, ancient and stern, while Zeus and his siblings claimed Olympus, yet untouched by war's wounds. The battles were fierce, unrelenting. Lightning split the skies, tides swallowed islands, volcanoes spewed flame, and winds howled like packs of wolves. It seemed the war would never cease, but Gaia, ever watchful, knew balance would not shift until a deeper power awoke. Again she counseled Zeus. To prevail, he must descend into Tartarus and free his monstrous uncles, the Cyclopes and the hundred-handed, whom Cronus had chained in fear. With his brothers and sisters, Zeus broke the gates of the underworld and loosed the prisoners. The Cyclopes, grateful and fiery, gifted Zeus his greatest weapon, the thunderbolt, emblem of storm and sky. To Poseidon they gave the trident, lordship of the seas, and to Hades the helm of darkness, granting invisibility. The Hecatoncheires, the hundred-handed, joined the fight, hurling mountains like stones and crushing the Titans with the fury of ancient freedom. With such allies, the tide turned. The Olympians struck with a wrath the Titans could not withstand. Cronus, proud and unyielding, fought to the last, but prophecy always fulfills itself. The Titans fell. One by one they were cast down. Zeus did not slay them, but bound them as his father had before, deep in Tartarus, behind bronze gates that would never rust or break, shackled by chains forged by the hundred-handed. Only a few escaped this fate, Prometheus and Epimetheus, who had stood with the gods, and Theseus, who foresaw the justice of their reign. Thus ended the rule of the Titans. The sky cleared, and the world, scarred by fire and war, began to heal. The throne passed to Zeus, not by birthright, but by strength, wisdom, and the hand of destiny. Yet even as he took the heavens, the shadow of Cronus' curse trailed him like the echo of an ancient song. For power once seized demands eternal vigilance, and no ruler, god or mortal, sits ever safe upon the throne. When war was done and silence returned beneath the heavens, the victors stood among the ruins of creation. The Titans lay bound in Tartarus, their groans swallowed by the black abyss where no echo rises. The old order was no more. But with the storm's end came a greater trial: to rule. Conquest may be won by fire and rage, but dominion demands judgment, patience, and division. The world was vast and wild, filled with powers known and unmaimed. It could not belong to one alone. Zeus, eldest among the gods now reborn, stood at the heart of a new age. Though not the firstborn, he was first in strength, in cunning, and in deed. But the ancient laws, carved not in stone, but in the very bones of the cosmos, did not grant him sole dominion. He had two brothers, hardened by war, bearing powers of their own: Poseidon, who lashed the sea to foam in his fury, and Hades, who wore the helm of darkness, moving unseen through battle and cavern. They too had shed blood, taken risks, endured loss. The throne of the universe could not be given to Zeus alone, lest the seeds of war sprout anew, this time among brothers. So the three gathered, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, and cast lots to divide the world, not by quarrel, nor by might, but by the hand of fate. The dice were thrown. When they fell, the world was parted into three great realms. To Zeus came the sky, the wide heavens, the air between stars and mountains. He became lord of thunder and rain, master of clouds and storms, undisputed king of Olympus. His voice rolled in thunder, his wrath flashed in lightning, and the eagle soared as his herald, highest of all. To Poseidon fell the sea, deep and restless, brimming with secrets and monsters. He took the oceans, rivers, and every spring of the earth. With his trident he could shatter rocks and summon tides. Beneath the waves he built a palace of coral and gold, where he ruled over fishes, currents, and ancient beasts. And to Hades was given the underworld, the realm of the dead, a gift few would covet, yet he accepted it with solemn resolve. He reigned over the kingdom of shadows with stern dignity. His dominion lay beneath the earth, a land untouched by sunlight. There he judged the souls, guardian of the riches of the deep, gems, metals, and secrets. Mortals feared his name, whispering it only in need, yet Hades kept the balance of life and death, breaking no law. The earth itself, body of Gaia, remained common ground. Thus the world was ordered: sky, sea, and underworld. Three brothers, each sovereign in his domain, swore never to war among themselves, lest the world be shattered again. They raised thrones and gathered allies. On Olympus, high above the clouds, Zeus called the gods to council. At his side stood his sisters, Hera, proud and keen as winter's frost; Demeter, whose steps awakened spring; and Hestia, eternal flame of every hearth. Others came as well, new and ancient alike: Athena, born of wisdom and war; Apollo, golden and all-seeing; Artemis, swift and silent; Ares, blood-stained; Hermes, quick of wit and winged of foot; Hephaestus, lame yet brilliant; and Aphrodite, whose smile could topple kingdoms. So began a new era, the age of Olympus. Yet though thrones were set and the world divided, peace could never last forever. For gods, however mighty, were not free of pride, desire, or wrath, and mortals, growing numerous upon the earth, carried their own tales, wars, and sorrows. The heavens had been won, but the world never truly knows peace when gods sit upon the throne. Here, Zeus, who had seized the heavens by strength and fate, gathered the new Pantheon. The Olympian court was unlike the kingdoms of mortals. No roads led to its gates. No heralds or armies guarded its base. The gods required no walls. The air itself barred mortals, too thin for their breath. Olympus knew no storm, no snow, no decay. Its halls were of marble and cloud, its vaults glittered with stars, and its corridors stretched wide, that the winds might wander free. Here the gods appeared not as shadows or omens, but in full majesty, radiant, terrible, more alive than all that walked below. At Olympus's summit, Zeus sat upon his throne of thunder, king of gods and men. He ruled not by might alone, though his power was boundless, but by destiny and the memory of war. His voice rolled like distant thunder, his gaze pierced cloud and time. In his hand he bore the lightning, gift of the Cyclopes, emblem of swift and certain judgment. Yet even he did not rule alone. Around him stood the pillars of the new world. Hera sat beside him, not merely as wife, but as queen, sovereign in her own right, goddess of marriage, motherhood, and the fury of the betrayed, proud and unyielding. She remembered every slight, and her jealousy would one day shape the fates of both gods and mortals. Her crown was no gift, it was earned, forged in the fire of betrayal, bound by the sacred oaths of Olympus. Demeter followed, goddess of grain and growth. Where her feet touched, the earth softened, seeds awoke. She bestowed harvest and plenty. Without her, the fields withered. Rarely did she linger on Olympus, often descending to the world of men, guarding farmers and mothers who whispered her name at dawn. She was older than many, quieter than most, yet none doubted her strength. And then came Hestia, the goddess of the hearth, the firstborn of Cronus and Rhea, and the last to be freed from her father's womb. She asked for no temples, sought no myths, demanded no wars or tales of passion. She guarded the eternal flame at the center of Olympus and watched over every home, every hearth on earth. Her power was gentle but unyielding. As long as fire burned, Hestia was near. In time came the younger gods, some born upon Olympus, others arriving by stranger paths. Athena was the first of them, born not from the womb, but from wisdom itself. When Zeus swallowed Metis, fearing her unborn child would surpass him, he thought it was over. But Metis did not perish. She lived within him, whispering, weaving schemes, crafting knowledge in darkness. One day Zeus cried out in agony. With a strike upon his skull, Athena burst forth, grown, armored, a spear in her hand, her eyes sharp and clear as flint. She became the goddess of wisdom, of strategy, and of righteous war, a virgin warrior, untouched by trifles. Then came Apollo and Artemis, the twin children of Leto, the Titaness who wandered long in search of a place to give birth. No land dared receive her. The wrath of Hera was vast and merciless. Only the floating isle of Delos sheltered her, and there she bore her children. Apollo, golden-haired and radiant, god of light, prophecy, music, and healing. His sister Artemis, swift and silver, goddess of the hunt, the wild, and the glow of the moon. Together they marked a new age of gods, brilliant, restless, close to mortals. After them came Ares, god of war and slaughter, son of Zeus and Hera, yet unloved by either parent. He was force without discipline, fury without cause. His name inspired fear, but seldom honor. War followed him like a shadow, and though he reveled in its chaos, more often he was overcome by cunning and wisdom. His opposite was Hephaestus, the lame god of the forge, master of craft and fire. Born of Hera alone or hurled from Olympus by Zeus, both tales endure. He found solace in metal, shaping wonders with hammer and flame. His hands made armor, palaces, automatons. Crippled and marred, he was among the gods the most indispensable. Aphrodite, goddess of beauty and desire, was not born but rose from the foam, from the flesh of Uranus cast into the sea. She stepped from the waves upon Cyprus, radiant and dangerous. Love, passion, jealousy, and ruin followed her everywhere. Even Zeus could not fully master her. One glance bound both gods and mortals. Her smile always carried consequence. Last of this early host came Hermes, trickster and herald. Son of Zeus and the nymph Maia, he moved easily between worlds. Upon his feet gleamed winged sandals, and upon his lips played a sly smile. On the very day of his birth, he stole Apollo's herds, sang a song to hide the theft, and made himself indispensable before he could even walk. Hermes became messenger of the gods, guide of souls, patron of thieves and travelers. Wherever he appeared, boundaries vanished. Thus, the Olympian court was formed, not a gathering of saints, but of forces, bright, flawed, radiant, boundless. They quarreled like siblings, meddled in mortal affairs, loved, betrayed, rivaled, and enacted divine justice. But above all, they ruled from Olympus, gazing upon the world and shaping it to their will. The age of Titans had ended. The age of gods had come. Those who walked among men begot heroes and forever changed the earth. Yet the world had barely found rulers, and still, as always, it remained fragile. Fate had not spoken its final word. Long before men raised marble cities or carved prayers in stone, there was no mankind upon the earth. The gods ruled alone. Their courts rose high upon Olympus, their domains unmeasured. The world below was green and wild, full of beasts and voiceless mountains. But none were there to till the soil, to sing to the stars, to kindle fire in the night. And then Prometheus, a titan of ancient blood, first imagined the form of man. He was no friend to Cronus, nor among those bound in Tartarus. In the war of Titans, he stood with Zeus, not out of love or loyalty, but foresight. He bore the gift of prophecy and knew where the storm would break. His name meant forethought, and it suited him. His brother Epimetheus, afterthought, was his opposite entire. Where Epimetheus acted rashly and mourned after, Prometheus gazed ahead, thought deeper, and questioned every decree, even divine. He dwelt on the border of Titan and Olympian, of old world and new, a creature of reason in a cosmos ruled by passion. Prometheus was the first to shape mankind. Some say he molded them from clay on a riverbank, forming with his hands and breathing life with his breath. Others claim he shaped them after the image of the gods, upright, thoughtful, gifted with the spark of invention. Yet whatever their origin, The first humans were frail. Their skin was soft, their steps slow. They had no claws, nor fangs, no fur, no fire. Beneath the sky they shivered in the cold, defenseless before beasts. Prometheus beheld them and took pity. He climbed Olympus and begged a gift for men, the power to survive, to rise above the animals. But Zeus denied him. In mortals he saw not promise, but threat. Barely enthroned, he feared all new powers. Let them live, but let them fear. Let them know their place beneath the gods. Fire belongs to the deathless, Hestia's hearth, Zeus's lightning, Hephaestus's forge. To mortals it shall not belong. But Prometheus did not yield. In secret, he climbed the heavens, stole a spark from Hephaestus's forge, and hid it in the stalk of a fennel plant. So he brought it to mankind, and for the first time, fire crackled beneath the stars. Smoke coiled above the trees. Light drove back the darkness. With fire came warmth, safety, cooking, metal, speech, craft. Humanity, once cold and silent, began to build. But with fire came defiance. Zeus soon learned of the theft. His wrath was terrible. To punish mankind, he ordered a gift that became their curse. Hephaestus shaped a woman from clay of flawless beauty. Aphrodite gave her charm, Hermes gave her cunning. Athena clothed her in silver raiment. Her name was Pandora, all gifted. Into her hands they placed a sealed vessel, later called a box, within which lay the woes of the world: disease, toil, sorrow, madness, envy, and death itself. Epimetheus, ever the fool, took her into his home despite his brother's warnings. And when Pandora, driven by curiosity, the final gift of the gods, opened the vessel, evil poured forth, like smoke from a fire too long stifled. Men who had barely tasted their golden youth were trapped by fate. Hunger shrank their bellies, wars bled them, old age bent their backs. In the vessel remained only hope, some say by chance, others by design, but it alone flickered amid the darkness. Yet Prometheus's punishment still awaited. For daring to defy Olympus, Zeus ordered him chained to a mountain at the edge of the world. Some name it the Caucasus, others lands drowned in myth. There they bound him with adamantine chains, unbreakable and eternal. Each day an eagle, born of Typhon or sent by Zeus, descended to tear at his liver. Each night it grew anew, and each dawn the torment began again. Prometheus was immortal, and so suffering could not kill him. He endured for ages, longer than kingdoms lived, longer than men remembered the gods themselves. Yet even in bondage he did not repent. He held a secret, a truth Zeus most feared, that one day the king of gods would be undone, not by blade nor rebellion, but by his own child. And this secret guarded Prometheus, for Zeus could not destroy him until he drew from him the name of the woman who would bear that doom. And the Titan waited, chained but unbroken, while men kindled fires and told tales of the one who dared steal from the gods. But the gods, however great, were not alone in shaping the world. Beneath Olympus, where earth drank the rain and warmed beneath the sun, men struggled, rose, and fell again and again. Their lives, brief and flickering beside the long memory of immortals, yet left their mark. Though Zeus ruled the heavens and Poseidon troubled the seas, the earth was filled with mortal deeds, both fair and bitter. Later poets looked back on this path and saw not one race of man, but many, each born in its age, marked by the gifts and punishments of gods. Hesiod, the farmer and singer of Boeotia, was the first to bind them in words, dividing the long road of mankind into 5 ages: golden, silver, bronze, heroic, and iron, each weaker than the last, save one. At the dawn was the golden age, and nothing after was ever its equal. It came in the reign of Cronus, before gods knew the fear of rebellion, before the earth bore iron and war. In those days, men lived as though they were gods themselves, without pain, without age, without toil. The earth yielded harvest at all seasons, without effort or prayer. There was no need of laws or swords, no kings nor coins. Those mortals knew neither hunger nor sickness nor grief. When their time drew near, they did not suffer, but departed as in sleep, becoming guardian spirits, pure, watchful, wandering the world as keepers of justice and peace. Their life was harmony, their existence nearest to Eden. But the golden age faded, as all golden things. With the fall of Cronus and the rise of Zeus came the Silver Age, a time less bright, of souls less noble. These mortals were tall and strong, they lived long, but lacked the wisdom and restraint of the golden race. Their childhood stretched 100 years, carefree and idle, but when grown, they became cruel and arrogant. They did not honor the gods, raised no temples, offered no gifts, mocked the laws of Olympus. And for this, Zeus struck them down. Their spirits became not guardians, nor kindly daimons, but sank to the underworld, pale and forgotten. Their race was lost to pride and defiance. Then came the Bronze Age, born of ash trees, the very wood from which spears and shields were made. These men were not gentle. They were war embodied, mighty, unyielding. Their flesh seemed forged of bronze, their houses of bronze, their tools of bronze, their hearts as though cast from the same metal. They lived for battle and perished in it, sowing the earth with blood and ash. They were terrible, yet not evil, driven only by the rhythm of war drums and the clash of arms. They built no cities, wrote no poems, raised no statues. When they died, nothing remained but broken swords and empty fields. Not even the gods mourned their passing. They sank into Hades without echo or prayer. But not every decline moves straight downward. From the blood and smoke of the Bronze Age, there flared a brief, dazzling light, the heroic age, a time unlike any other. It was not a step in decay, but a pause of glory before the final dusk. These mortals stood higher than those before them, and far above those who followed. They were demigods, sons and daughters of gods and mortals. They built cities, sailed seas, carved their names into the memory of the world. This was the age of Perseus and Heracles, Theseus and Atalanta, Jason and the Argonauts, Hector, Achilles and Odysseus. They fought in great wars, against monsters, foreign kings, and at last against one another beneath the walls of Troy. Many died young, many forgotten, yet their stories lived on, in songs, in stone, in epic verse and prayer. Some were granted a place in the Isles of the Blessed, beyond the ocean's edge, where heroes dwell forever in peace and radiant sunlight. The heroic age did not last long, but while it burned, It lit the whole world. And then came the age Hesiod called his own, the age of iron, the age in which we still dwell. It is an age of sorrow and toil, a world grown heavy and old. Men now labor from dawn to dusk, planting seeds in bitter soil, raising children amidst wars and famine, growing old in pain and fear. In the Iron Age, bonds are easily broken between friends, kin, guest, and host. Justice, once lofty and golden, now walks with averted gaze. Lies abound, oaths are hollow, and the gods, if they still watch, remain silent. In this age, men build towers, yet forget their ancestors. They chase gold and power, cutting down the forests that once fed them. It is an age of struggle, and they say one day even this shall end. The day will come when the gods turn away at last. The day will come when Zeus hurls his lightning, and mankind will vanish like smoke in the wind. And yet, while the age of iron endures, men still build, still hope, still tell tales of times when mortals were golden and gods walked among them. And perhaps this fragile hope, still alive, is the one gift Zeus did not take back when Pandora opened the jar. In the fading light, between the age of gods and the age of men, there arose a new breed of mortals, unlike any before. Born not only of clay, but of divine blood, of earthly women and the power of Olympus. They were heroes. Their lives were short, their fates cruel, yet their names thundered through the centuries like distant storms. Among the first and greatest was Perseus, slayer of monsters, founder of dynasties, forerunner of all who would wear the crown of hero. His tale began not in battle, but in prophecy and fear. His mother, Danae, was princess of Argos, daughter of King Acrisius, and the king, like all rulers of that age, feared what he could not master. The oracle foretold his daughter would bear a son who would kill him, and such prophecies, in myth or life, cannot be bribed nor silenced. Acrisius did what kings so often do when faced with a truth they dread. He tried to destroy the cause. He sealed Danae in a bronze chamber underground, in a room where neither time nor men could enter. But the gods, as ever, mocked human caution. Zeus, taking the form of golden rain, slipped through the cracks no lock could bar, and fell upon Danae in her solitude. From this union, Perseus was conceived. When Acrisius learned of the child, he dared not spill royal blood. Even tyrants feared the wrath of gods. So he placed Danae and her infant in a wooden chest and cast it into the sea, entrusting Poseidon or chance to swallow them in the waves. But the sea is fickle, like fate. The chest did not sink, but drifted on wine-dark waters until it reached the isle of Seriphos. There, a humble fisherman, Dictys, drew it ashore. He sheltered them, raising Perseus as his own. And Perseus grew, tall, strong, with a king's bearing and eyes like storm clouds. But the world seldom grants peace to those marked by destiny. The ruler of Seriphos, King Polydectes, saw Danae's beauty and desired her. Perseus, now a man, stood between them. Polydectes dared not strike openly, so he turned to cunning. He proclaimed a feigned wedding, some say to Hippodamia, and demanded that each man of the island bring him a gift. Perseus, lacking gold or steeds, boasted that he would bring another gift, the head of Medusa, the mortal Gorgon whose gaze turned flesh to stone. The task was cruel. Polydectes knew none had ever returned from Medusa. She was one of 3 Gorgon sisters, daughters of ancient sea gods. Hideous, winged, with serpents for hair, with eyes cursed by eternity. Only Medusa was mortal, her sisters were not. But the gods watched over Perseus. Athena, born from her father's head, remembered her grievance. Once Medusa had been a maiden in her temple, but Poseidon's pride defiled the sanctuary. Athena gave Perseus a shield polished bright as a mirror, that he might behold the Gorgon's reflection without meeting her eyes. Hermes, swift and sly, gave him a curved blade and winged sandals, and pointed him toward the Graeae, the ancient sisters who shared a single eye. Perseus stole their eye and ransomed it for truth. They told him of the nymphs who guarded sacred gifts, the helm of Hades that made its wearer unseen, the kibisis, the pouch that could hold the Gorgon's head, and the road beyond ocean's edge, where no light rose and the Gorgons slept among their stony victims.
Armed with these gifts, Perseus flew over seas and deserts to the edge of the world. He found them sleeping, Medusa and her sisters, in a shadowed grove amid statues that once were men. He dared not look upon her. Holding Athena's shield before him, step by step, he crept backward until he stood over the sleeping Gorgon. With one swift stroke, he severed her head. From her blood sprang Pegasus, the winged horse, and Chrysaor, the warrior with a golden blade, children of Poseidon born in her death. Medusa's sisters shrieked and took to the air, but Perseus vanished beneath Hades' helm. His journey home was long. Along the way, he reached the shores of Ethiopia, where a sea monster ravaged the land in punishment of King Cepheus and Queen Cassiopeia. Their daughter, Andromeda, was chained to a rock as sacrifice. Perseus, moved by her innocence and beauty, slew the beast, turning it to stone with Medusa's head, and claimed Andromeda as his bride. When he returned to Seriphos, Polydectes mocked his tale. Then Perseus unveiled the Gorgon's head, and the king and all his court were frozen into stone. Dictys, the fisherman who had shown kindness, was made king in his place. The circle of cruelty was broken, though not forever. But prophecies do not fade. Perseus journeyed to Argos. Acrisius, still fearing the oracle's words, fled to avoid his grandson. Yet fate cannot be outrun. At funeral games in a neighboring land, Perseus cast a discus. It struck an old man in the crowd, and that man was Acrisius. He died, never knowing that his death was no murder, but an accident long foretold. Thus the circle closed. Perseus fulfilled the prophecy, not by malice, but by fate's design. He slew monsters, saved maidens, founded dynasties, and bore with honor the weight of destiny. He did not live forever, but his name did. For from his blood would come Heracles, and with him a new chapter in the tale of gods and men. Heracles pursued it for a full year through hills and rivers until at last he captured it alive, winning the grudging approval of the goddess. The fourth labor brought him to the Erymanthian boar, a monstrous beast of the wild. He seized it in the snowy mountains of Arcadia and dragged it in chains to Tiryns, laughing while Eurystheus cowered in terror inside a bronze jar. The fifth labor was far less glorious, to cleanse the Augean stables where thousands of cattle had stood for decades without broom or shovel. Heracles, ever resourceful, diverted rivers to wash the filth away in a single day. The sixth labor, to drive off the Stymphalian birds, man-eaters with bronze beaks and razor-feathered wings. With Athena's rattle, he startled them into flight and shot them from the sky. The seventh labor carried him far west to capture the Cretan bull, sire of the Minotaur. Heracles subdued it and brought it back alive, its eyes burning with madness and the fury of the sea. The eighth labor sent him north to Thrace, where he tamed the mares of Diomedes, beasts that fed on human flesh. He cast their master to them, and they grew tame. The ninth labor required both diplomacy and blood. He was ordered to win the belt of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. She agreed to yield it peacefully, but Hera spread lies, and battle broke out. Heracles slew Hippolyta and escaped with the belt. The 10th labor brought him to the world's edge, to Erythea, where he stole the cattle of Geryon, the three-bodied giant. He raised the pillars of Heracles at the Strait of Gibraltar and fought giant, herdsman, and hound at once before driving the red cattle across continents. But Eurystheus, seeking to diminish his glory, declared 2 labors void, saying Aeolus had helped with the Hydra and the rivers with the stables. Thus 2 more were demanded. The 11th labor, to steal the golden apples of the Hesperides, guarded by nymphs and a coiling dragon at the tree's root. Heracles tricked Atlas, bearer of the heavens, into retrieving them while he held the sky in his place. When Atlas tried to leave the burden with him, Heracles feigned agreement, asked only to adjust his cloak, and shifted the vault back upon the Titan, escaping with the fruit. The 12th and final labor was the most dreadful, to descend into Hades and bring forth Cerberus, the 3-headed hound. Armed only with his strength, Heracles entered the underworld, stood before Hades, and with grim consent seized Cerberus and dragged him, howling and foaming, into the light of the living. With this, his penance was fulfilled. But Heracles' life found no peace. He waged wars, took wives, fathered children. Hera's hatred never faded. In the end, it was not monster nor blade that slew him, but the poisoned blood of the centaur Knossos, soaked into a robe given by his wife Deianira, thinking it a charm of love. As the venom burned his flesh, Heracles built his own pyre on the mountain. None dared set it aflame until a humble shepherd, Philoctetes, stepped forth. For this he was given the hero's bow. Heracles burned in the fire, but in death was reborn. Zeus lifted him to Olympus, granting immortality and the hand of Hebe, goddess of youth. He became not only a hero, but a god. His labors, born of pain and guilt, became the measure of heroism. Where others were remembered in tales, Heracles was worshipped in shrines, in games, and in the hearts of men, who, though mortal, dared to dream of greatness. His story is woven with myth and memory, with the thunder of heroes and the whisper of politics. In him lived both raw strength and radiant reason, a double spirit of the people who worshipped Athena, spear in hand, olive branch upon her brow. Theseus was born of 2 fathers, King Aegeus of Athens and Poseidon, god of the sea. His mother Aethra lay with both in a single night, with man and with God. From this double union came a child of fate, raised far from Athens, in Trojan, knowing nothing of the blood in his veins. Before leaving, Aegeus hid beneath a heavy stone a sword and sandals, telling Aethra, When the boy is strong enough to lift the stone, he will be ready to claim his inheritance. Soon, Theseus grew tall and sharp-eyed, restless in body and mind. At 16, with a growl and a smile, he moved the stone and took his father's gifts. Many would have chosen the easy sea road to Athens, but Theseus chose the land, the long and perilous way, for he believed a true kingdom must be earned, not inherited. Thus began his 6 labors, not vast and godlike like Heracles's, but earthly and close, each a beast of the road, a curse upon simple folk. He struck down Periphetes, the club-bearer, taking his weapon as a sign. He slew Sinus, who tore travelers apart with pines. He cast into the sea Sciron, who forced passers-by to wash his feet before hurling them from a cliff. He defeated Cercion the wrestler, overcoming brute strength with skill, and Procurstus, who stretched or cut his victims to fit an iron bed, meeting death by his own device. Theseus did more than survive. He cleansed the land, opening the road for Athens. When he arrived in Athens, King Aegeus did not know him, but Queen Medea, wife of Aegeus, and still full of sorcery's spite, saw danger in the youth and urged her husband to poison him. Yet Theseus revealed the sword and sandals, and in the last instant, Aegeus dashed the cup away, embracing his son before all the court. But joy in myth never lasts. To the east, doom was ripening. For years, Athens had borne a heavy tribute. In war with Crete, they were defeated, and in punishment, King Minos demanded every 9 years the sending of 7 youths and 7 maidens, food for the Minotaur, half man, half beast, born of lust and curse, imprisoned in the Labyrinth beneath the palace of Knossos. This creature came from Minos's pride. When Poseidon sent a bull from the sea, Minos was to sacrifice it, but he kept it. In wrath, the gods cursed his wife Pasiphae with mad desire for the beast. From their unholy union was born the Minotaur, Asterion, horned and furious. He was locked within the labyrinth, crafted by the genius Daedalus. When Theseus heard of the tribute, he stepped forward among the doomed. He sailed not as victim, but as hunter. Before departing, he promised his father, if he triumphed, he would return with white sails, if he fell, with black. On Crete, he met his fate. Ariadne, daughter of Minos and half-sister to the Minotaur, fell in love with him. She gave him a ball of thread and the secret of the labyrinth's paths. By night, Theseus entered the stone coils, where each turn led to another turn. There he found the monster. Without words they clashed, prince and nightmare. Theseus, armed with skill and sharp skeels, slew the beast, and following the thread, found the light again. He fled with Ariadne and the freed Athenians. Yet love in Greek tales is never simple. On Knossos, Theseus abandoned her. Some say Dionysus claimed her, others that Theseus feared what power Athens might wield with a Cretan queen. She awoke alone, weeping beneath foreign stars, but Theseus sailed on, forgetting or grieving not to change his sails. From the cliffs, Aegeus saw the black upon the horizon, believed his son dead, and cast himself into the sea, which bears his name to this day, the Aegean. As king, Theseus did not rest. He united Attica, binding its villages into one city-state. He founded festivals and games, temples and laws. He was a hero of rule no less than of battle. Again and again he entered legend, fighting beside Heracles against the Amazons, descending with his reckless friend Prometheus into the underworld to seize Persephone. That journey ended in ruin. Prometheus was swallowed by the earth and Theseus chained to the chair of forgetfulness. Only Heracles, passing on his labors, broke his bonds. But time turned. At last, the Athenians, weary of kings and charmed by new heroes and philosophies, cast Theseus out. He fled to the Isle of Skyros, where a jealous king betrayed him and hurled him from a cliff. Later, the Athenians brought back his bones and buried them with honor. But at the moment of death, he was alone, no crowd, no crown, no chorus. And yet his legacy endured. If Heracles embodied the strength of the body, Theseus was the strength of the polis, the city, the law, the people bound not by blood, but by order. Athens rose upon his shoulders, and though they worshipped Athena, they remembered the king who laid their foundation. Long before Troy's fall, and after the clash of the Titans, another voyage took place. A journey across lands and seas, binding heroes in brotherhood, ending in betrayal and exile. This was the tale of dragons and oaths, of kings cast down and thrones restored. At its heart stood Jason, a prince exiled in youth, a hero forged not by war and prophecy, but by the slow fire of vengeance. His story began in Iolcus, a coastal realm of Thessaly. His father was dethroned by his own brother Peleus, who knew only power. Fearing the boy heir, he sought Jason's death at birth. But his mother Alcimede saved him, entrusting him to the wise centaur Chiron, teacher of Achilles and Asclepius. Jason grew strong and keen, tempered by hunting and the songs of fallen and risen kings. Years passed. The youth returned to the city, losing one sandal in a river while carrying across an old woman, Hera in disguise, testing him. Peleus saw the stranger with a single sandal and blanched. An oracle had once warned him, "Beware the man with one sandal." Jason raised no cry, nor drew his blade. He spoke plainly. He was the son of the rightful king. Peleus feigned welcome, yet set a trial before him. "If you seek the crown, prove it. Bring me the golden fleece from far Colchis." There, in a sacred grove, it hung upon an oak, guarded by a dragon and by Helios' son, King Aeetes. No Greek had gone and returned, yet Jason agreed. He gathered the heroes of Hellas. Heracles came, Orpheus with his lyre, the huntress Atalanta, the Dioscuri, Castor and Polydeuces, Meleager, Theseus, the winged sons of Boreas, and others, 50 leaders. Together they boarded the ship Argo, crafted by Argus under Athena's eye. In its prow was set a fragment of Dodona's holy oak, alive with prophecy. The ship itself became a hero, whispering counsel, guiding fate. They sailed east, past shores and storms, into legend. Their first trials came not from beasts, but from men. On Lemnos they found a land ruled by women who had slain all their husbands. There Jason lay with their queen, Ipsipyle, fathering sons he would never see grown. In Thrace they met the blind seer, Phineus, tormented by harpies fouling his food. The Boreads drove the monsters away, winning Phineus's guidance, the path through the clashing rocks, two cliffs that smashed together like jaws, destroying all who tried to pass. At his counsel they loosed a dove. It flew through, losing only a single tail feather. Argo followed, the cliffs snapping shut just behind her stern. Thereafter, the passage lay still. The sea itself seemed to honor those who dared. At last they reached Colchis, land of fire and iron. King Aeetes did not slay them at once. Jason was a stranger, and in that age, strangers were sacred. But Aeetes agreed to yield the fleece only if Jason completed 3 tasks: yoke fire-breathing bulls, plow a field with them, sow it with dragon's teeth, and overcome the warriors that rose from the earth. Trials not of courage, but of the impossible. All would have ended there had not the gods intervened. At Hera's plea, Eros struck Medea, daughter of Aeetes, with his arrow. She was a priestess of Hecate, mistress of herbs and poisons, untouched by men, cold as moonlight. Yet at Jason's sight, her heart betrayed her. She gave him a potion to guard against flame, taught him to cast a stone among the earth-born soldiers so they would turn on one another, and finally led him to the fleece itself, guarded by a sleepless serpent. Medea's chants lulled the beast into slumber. Jason seized the fleece, soft and radiant as molten gold, and fled into the night with Medea. Aeetes pursued them by ship, but the fugitives bought their time with blood. Medea seized her younger brother Absyrthus, caught him into pieces, and scattered them in the sea, forcing her father to halt and gather his remains for burial. Thus Argo escaped, shadowed by crime and sorcery. Their return was a wandering past Scylla and Charybdis, through lands of peril and delay. At last they reached Iolcus, but Peleus refused to yield the crown. In vengeance, Medea tricked his daughters, making them cut their father to pieces and boil him, claiming it was a rite of renewal. The people, horrified, rose in fury. Jason, stained with betrayal, was cast out. He fled to Corinth, where he lived with Medea for years in uneasy peace. But seeking legitimacy, he spurned her for a Corinthian princess. Medea, shamed and wrathful, unleashed a fury no mortal could endure. She poisoned the bridal gown, and it consumed the bride to ash. She slew her own sons by Jason. Then she fled in a chariot drawn by dragons, gift of her grandfather Helios. Broken, Jason returned to Iolcus. In his final days, he wandered among forgotten ruins. Resting once beneath the rotting hulk of the Argo, long hauled ashore, he was struck by a falling beam and killed. Thus ended the great hero, not in battle, not in glory, but in silence, beneath the bones of his past. Yet the tale of Jason endured. In the quest for the fleece, in the gathering of heroes, in the love that turned to poison, and in greatness undone from within, Greece found one of its eternal myths, the promise and the price of ambition. There are few dynasties in Greek myth more sinister than the royal house of Thebes. Where other heroes fought monsters or sought distant thrones, the kings of Thebes battled their own kin and wrestled with the past itself. Their legacy was not forged in bronze nor sung in hymns, but written in riddles, madness, and blood. Even the city's foundation bore omens and unease. Thebes began with a search. Cadmus, a Phoenician prince and brother of Europa, set out to find his sister, stolen by Zeus in the guise of a white bull. Failing to bring her back, Cadmus turned to the oracle at Delphi. The god instructed him to abandon his search and follow a cow until it lay down. There, he was to found his city. Obedient, Cadmus followed until the beast fell upon a hill. But when his companions went for water, they were slain by a serpent sacred to Ares, guardian of the spring. Cadmus slew the serpent himself, and at Athena's command, he sowed its teeth into the earth. From the soil rose warriors, the Spartoi, the sown men. They turned upon one another until only 5 survived. These 5 became the noble houses of Thebes, and Cadmus their king. Yet the slaying of the serpent brought down Ares' wrath. For 8 years Cadmus served the war god in penance. At last he wed Harmonia, daughter of Ares and Aphrodite, and the gods themselves came to their feast. As a wedding gift, the couple received a cursed necklace, forged by Hephaestus, a wonder of beauty that doomed all who wore it. Thus began Thebes' curse, not in hatred, but in celebration, marked forever by splendor and blood. Generations passed. The daughters of Cadmus met cruel fates. Ino went mad and cast her child into the sea. Autonoe's son Actaeon was torn apart by his own hounds for glimpsing Artemis unclothed. Semele, beloved of Zeus, was deceived by Hera and perished in a thunderclap. And Agave, driven to frenzy by Dionysus, tore her son Pentheus limb from limb, believing him a lion. Yet it was through Cadmus's great-grandson Laius that the true tragedy unfolded. Laius became king of Thebes and wed Jocasta, but the gods had not forgiven Cadmus's line. The prophecy declared, if Laius fathered a son, the child would kill his father and marry his mother. As always in Greek tales, the warning did not prevent the sin. Laius and Jocasta had a boy. In fear, Laius pierced the infant's ankles and ordered a servant to abandon him on Mount Cithaeron. But pity intervened. The servant passed the child to a shepherd, who in turn gave him to the king and queen of Corinth, Polybus and Merope, who had no heirs. The boy was named Oedipus, swollen foot, and was never told the truth. Oedipus grew clever and proud, yet whispers reached him. Seeking the truth, he went to Delphi, where the oracle spoke the same prophecy. He would kill his father and marry his mother. Horrified, believing Polybus and Merope to be his parents, Oedipus fled Corinth, straight into the arms of fate. At a crossroads near Daulis, he met a haughty old man. A quarrel flared over the right-of-way, and Oedipus slew the man and his guards, not knowing he had killed his true father, Laius. He journeyed on to Thebes, besieged not by armies, but by the Sphinx, a lion-bodied, eagle-winged, woman-faced terror. She devoured all who could not answer her riddle. What walks on 4 in the morning, 2 at noon, and 3 in the evening? Oedipus replied without hesitation, man. In despair, the Sphinx hurled herself from her rock. Thebes rejoiced. Their savior was made king and wed the widowed queen Jocasta, his mother. Years passed. Oedipus ruled wisely, fathering 4 children, Eteocles, Polynices, Antigone, and Ismene. But plague fell upon the city, and the oracle proclaimed the land was cursed by unavenged blood. The truth emerged slowly, horribly. The old man at the crossroads, the queen's grief, the scars on Oedipus's feet, the spared servant, and the seer Tiresias naming him at once father, brother, son, and husband. Jocasta hanged herself. Oedipus, seizing her brooches, blinded himself. He begged for exile and wandered in misery, guided only by Antigone's hand. In the hills near Colonus, he found refuge, and at last a secret grave, hidden by the gods. But his children could not escape the curse. Eteocles and Polynices fought for the throne. Polynices, driven out, returned with an Argive host, and 7 champions marched against Thebes. The city drowned in blood. Brothers slew each other at the gates. Thebes endured, but its spirit broke. Antigone, the last to keep honor, buried her brother despite the king's decree. For this her uncle Creon condemned her to die, sealing her alive in stone. The gods answered with madness and death upon his house. Thebes stood, yet its crown was only sorrow. The story of Oedipus is not of monsters or glory, but of fate, how a man may flee prophecy and yet fall straight into its grasp. It is a tragedy born not of evil, but of ignorance, a man seeking truth, destroyed by it. The house of Thebes, for all its grandeur, was raised upon serpents' bones and riddles. Yet no riddle, however wisely solved, could alter the will of the gods. And of all wars that scarred the earth of mortals, none would resound more loudly than the one fought for the face of a woman. A war of oaths and pride, of beauty and betrayal, of gods and kings, of empires brought low. And it began not with spears and fire, but with a wedding feast, to which every god was invited, save one.
Eros, goddess of strife, was not welcome at the wedding of Peleus and Thetis, the sea nymph fated to bear a son greater than his father. In wrath, she cast among the revelers a golden apple, inscribed with 3 words that would topple kingdoms: "To the fairest." Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite each claimed it, each certain she was most worthy. To settle the matter, they turned to a mortal shepherd, Paris, son of King Priam, exiled to the mountains, for prophecy foretold he would burn Troy. The goddesses brought him to judgment upon Mount Ida, and one by one offered their bribes. Hera promised dominion over all mankind. Athena offered wisdom and victory in war. But Aphrodite, smiling softly as distant thunder, vowed him the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris chose love. Thus Helen of Sparta, daughter of Zeus and wife of Menelaus, was marked by destiny. Many suitors had sought her hand, princes and kings of Hellas, drawn by beauty and blood alike, for her lineage traced to Olympus. Her mortal father, King Tyndareus, feared war over her marriage. On Odysseus's counsel, he bound all suitors by a solemn oath. Whosoever won Helen, all others must defend that union and punish any who broke it. The oath was sworn in jest, yet oaths bind not only men, but fate itself. Menelaus, brother of Agamemnon of Mycenae, won her hand. Their reign in Sparta was just, their kingdom secure. But when Paris came as envoy and guest, he beheld Helen and knew her as Aphrodite's promised gift. Whether taken by force or won by desire, the songs disagree. Yet when Paris sailed across the Aegean, Helen went with him, and in that moment, war began. Menelaus raged. He called upon the oath, and all who had sworn it answered. Odysseus of Ithaca, cunning and reluctant; Nestor, the aged sage of Pylos; Ajax the greater, son of Telamon, mighty and grim; Ajax the lesser, swift and fierce; Diomedes of Argos, bold and thirsting for battle; Idomeneus of Crete, steadfast and loyal. From every corner of Hellas they came, kings, princes, warlords. Only 2 resisted. Odysseus, feigning madness, yoked an ox and an ass, and sowed his fields with salt, until a crafty envoy set his infant son before the plow. And Achilles, son of Theseus, whom his mother had hidden among the daughters of Lycomedes, dressed in silks to escape his foretold doom. But the Greeks found him too. Again Odysseus laying a spear and shield among the gifts, the youth reached for war. They gathered at Aulis, a fleet of 1,000 ships, bronze gleaming, sails dark as storm clouds. But no wind stirred. The ship stood still, and men murmured. Calchas revealed the cause. Artemis was offended, by a boast perhaps, or a slain deer. Only a great sacrifice could appease her. The name he uttered was Iphigenia, daughter of Agamemnon. Some say she was lured to Aulis with promise of marriage to Achilles. Some tell of her mother Clytemnestra's tears, and all recall the moment the blade rose. A few whisper Artemis spared the maiden, replacing her with a deer, but most insist the blood was real. The gods desired to see a king slay his own child for war. Then came the winds. The fleet sailed east. The world shifted. The Greeks set foot on Trojan soil, not as raiders, but as vengeance itself. For 10 long years they stood before the walls of Ilium, Priam's mighty city, defended by his sons, Hector, noble and doomed, Paris, handsome and weak, Deiphobus, Hellenes, and others. The gods chose their sides. Hera, Athena, and Poseidon favored the Greeks. Aphrodite, Ares, Apollo, and Artemis stood with the Trojans. Only Zeus sought to rise above the strife, yet even he swayed, drawn by fate and by family. This was not yet the tale Homer sang in the Iliad, whose song begins in the war's 10th year. But already the struggle raged, not only with spears and walls, but with oaths, betrayals, the sacrifice of daughters, and the judgment of gods. A war born not of love alone, but of pride, of divine rivalry, of mortal vanity. A war destined to end not in triumph, but in flame. At the dawn of the Iliad, the war beneath Troy's walls had already dragged on for 9 long years. The Greeks, once fierce in their charge across the Aegean, now lived in the rhythm of siege and survival. Camps sprawled along the shore, ships hauled onto the sand, and day after day raiding parties set forth, not only for glory, but for bread. The war lingered like a wound that would not heal. The Trojans, shielded behind walls said to be raised by Poseidon and the mortal craftsman Apollo, endured yet held fast. Fields about the city lay barren. Allies streamed in from east and north, Sarpedon of Lycia, Memnon of Ethiopia, and others besides. But the Greeks would not depart, not while Helen remained. Oaths bound them, and pride. Yet war lived not only in walls and ships, but in hearts. And 2 hearts burned brighter than all others: Agamemnon, high king of kings, and Achilles, son of Theseus and Peleus, peerless warrior, doomed to swift death and yearning that it have worth. Between them flared a quarrel. As so often, it began with women. In one raid, the Greeks seized captives Chryseis, daughter of Apollo's priest, and Briseis, princess of Lyrnessus. Chryseis was awarded to Agamemnon, Briseis to Achilles. When Chryseis' father came with ransom and pleas, Agamemnon spurned and shamed him. The old man prayed, and Apollo answered, not with flame, but with plague. Beasts perished, men fell, the air itself thick with death. Calchas revealed the cause. Agamemnon yielded Chryseis, yet in spite demanded Briseis from Achilles. This insult Achilles could not bear. He rose in wrath, branded Agamemnon coward and greedy, and swore by the gods he would fight no more, let the Greeks bleed without him. He withdrew to his tent, and with him withdrew the Myrmidons, his dread companions. From that hour the balance tipped. The Trojans pressed hard. Hector, son of Priam, led them forward, solemn and noble. He was the city's soul, husband, father, defender not for pride but for duty. Day by day he drove the Greeks to the sea. Ships caught fire, heroes fell. Patroclus, beloved of Achilles, friend, some say, lover, but all agree only he could reach the hero's heart, could not endure the ruin. When Trojans breached the ramparts, Patroclus begged to lead the Myrmidons. Clad in Achilles' armor, mounted in his chariot, he roused the Greeks anew. Yet chasing glory not his own, he pressed too far. At Troy's very gates he met Hector. The duel was fierce. Hector's spear pierced Patroclus, and with him perished Achilles' last calm. Grief shook the camp. He did not weep, he howled like a storm. He returned, not for oath or honor, but for vengeance.
Theseus brought him new armor, wrought by Hephaestus, bronze blazing like the sun, a shield engraved with all the world. Achilles stormed to battle. None could stand. He slaughtered by scores. Chariots overturned. Blood ran like rivers. Thrice he drove Hector around the walls before their fated duel. Hector fought bravely, yet Achilles' fire was unquenchable. He struck him down, then in fury bound his corpse to the chariot and dragged it round the city, denying burial. Only old King Priam softened his rage. Guided by Hermes, he stole into the Greek camp, clasped Achilles' hands, the hands that slew his son, and kissed them. He spoke not as king, but as father, and Achilles wept. He returned Hector's body, granting him peace. For a moment the war fell silent, but peace, as ever, was fleeting. Achilles did not live to see the end. An arrow loosed by Paris, some say guided by Apollo, struck his heel, the one mortal place. He fell into dust, young and peerless. The Iliad ends not with Troy's fall, but with funeral and grief. Yet the war was not done. The horse was yet unhewn, the gates not yet broken. Blood was spilled, and the end already stirred. The land lay spent. 10 years of siege turned warriors to shadows, kings to ghosts, heroes to memory. Troy, once golden, stood like an old lion ringed by wolves.
And one dawn the Trojans beheld the sea empty, no Greek sails. Before the Scaean gates stood a horse, wooden like a temple, smooth cedar with a mane for Poseidon's honor. No clash of arms, no war cries, as if the war were done. Priam doubted, but a cunning Greek, left behind by design, deceived with words as though Odysseus himself spoke through him. He claimed the horse a gift to Athena, a vow of peace. Bring it in, rule will be yours. Destroy it, doom will come. Only Laocoon cried out, "Fear the Greeks, even bearing gifts!" He hurled his spear into the horse's flank. The wood groaned, something stirred within. But at once from the sea surged serpents, vast with eyes like embers. They crushed Laocoon and his sons. The people took it for a sign, and the horse was drawn within the walls. That night, when feasting died and fires dimmed, a hatch opened in the horse's belly. Out crept Odysseus, Menelaus, Neoptolemus, Diomedes, and others, chosen for wrath and guile. At the same time, the fleet returned from hiding by Tenedos. Troy slept. What followed was not war, but slaughter. Neoptolemus, son of Achilles, stormed the palace like a black whirlwind. He slew Priam at Zeus's altar, the old king's blood soaking the stones. Cassandra, prophetess, once more unheard, was dragged away screaming. Hecuba beheld her sons slain and her city ruined. Astyanax, Hector's infant son, was hurled from the walls lest another defender rise. Temples were defiled, women taken, the city given to flame. Helen, for whom it all began, was found within. Some say weeping, begging forgiveness, others say proud, unashamed. Menelaus raised his sword and lowered it. He led her back to Sparta. Thus the war claimed its final victim. At dawn the plain was ash, walls fallen, gods turned away. Yet even then the war's end was not clean. The victors bore their own curses. Ajax the Lesser, who defiled Athena's temple, was drowned at sea. Agamemnon, home with Cassandra his captive, was struck down in his bath by his wife Clytemnestra.
the house of Atreus bled on. Menelaus and Helen returned to Sparta, their names forever stained. Diomedes, Nestor, others vanished into exile and oblivion. Odysseus, cursed by Poseidon, wandered 10 more years before Ithaca. His trials, shipwrecks, monsters, divine spite became legend of sorrow. Only Aeneas, son of Anchises and Aphrodite, bore his father on his back and led his son by the hand, carrying Troy's last ember west to Italy. From his line, Romans claimed, sprang Romulus, Remus, and an empire greater than Troy. The fall was more than loss of towers. It was the end of an age, a heroic world where men feasted with gods, where glory outweighed peace, where fate was carved in flesh and stone. The horse, betrayal, fire, women weeping, these were the final chords of a song begun with an apple, ending in ash. Walls that held 10 years fell in one night, and Troy's ashes scattered on the wind, indifferent to victors or vanquished. Yet Troy's fall was not the end of story. It marked the beginning of other tragedies, not on battlefields, but on dark seas, in storms, and in palaces of once proud kings. For survivors, war was but a prologue. The homeward path proved harsher than the siege. The gods, unappeased by Troy's ruin, cast wrath upon the conquerors. Winds that once bore them to war now scattered them like leaves. Agamemnon seemed first to return. He sailed with Cassandra, with plunder and tales, and with the shadow of crime. The gods had not forgotten Iphigenia, the daughter slain to appease Artemis at war's outset, nor had Clytemnestra forgotten, wife and mother, widowed in spirit though her husband lived. She had taken a lover, Aegisthus, of the cursed Atreid line, and together they plotted murder. The conqueror came home, weary, proud, and entered his house as into a snare. Some say stabbed in the bath, others that Clytemnestra wrapped him in cloth and struck with an axe. Cassandra perished beside him, crying in tongues none heeded. Clytemnestra, blood-stained, unyielding, proclaimed the killing just. In this house, vengeance was tradition. And vengeance came again. Orestes, son of Agamemnon and Clytemnestra, returned from exile. Urged by Apollo, hounded by the Furies, he slew his mother and her lover. His tale of blood and cleansing, of madness and pardon, echoed long in courts and myths of Hellas. Yet he was not the only wanderer seeking home. Menelaus and Helen drifted on seas, driven south into Egypt. Some claimed the true Helen had always remained there, a phantom only in Troy. Others swore she went willingly with Paris, and Menelaus forgave her, weary of war and hungry for peace. They returned to Sparta and ruled in quiet, but Helen's name was curse, and Sparta never rose again. Most bitter was Odysseus's journey. His road stretched 10 years, Poseidon's punishment for arrogance and guile. He had devised the horse, led the sack, profaned shrines, provoked the gods. Poseidon marked him for torment. Odysseus's ship wandered isle to isle, each stranger than the last. He blinded the Cyclops Polyphemus, Poseidon's son, escaping with the ruse of nobody. He dwelt with Circe, who turned men to swine, and with Calypso, who held him 7 years as lover. He reached the underworld's brink, spoke with the dead, heard the siren's song lashed to the mast. He sailed between Scylla and Charybdis, lost all his men to storm and folly, and at last was cast alone upon the Phaeacian shore. Moved by his tale, they gave him a ship. So he returned to Ithaca, ragged, cold-eyed, bearded long. But home bore new foes. Suitors swarmed his halls, feasting and wooing Penelope, who delayed with nightly weaving, undone by dawn. Telemachus, his son, a loyal swineherd, and the bow only its master could bend, aided him. Odysseus slew the suitors one by one. Blood ran through the palace. Peace returned, but briefly, the circle of war and vengeance forever near. Others met harsher fates. Ajax the Lesser fell to Athena's wrath. Diomedes, valiant in battle, at home met betrayal of wife and hatred of people. He departed west to found cities that faded into myth. Philoctetus, who slew Paris with Heracles' bow, found no welcome and roamed. Neoptolemus, son of Achilles, was struck down at Delphi upon Apollo's altar. The Trojan War promised glory, but yielded ash. Heroes who had stood shoulder to shoulder beneath Ilium's walls returned to ruined homes, hostile gods, and wives bitter as loss itself. Not victors remained, only survivors. Yet long before Troy's towers rose, before heroes raised shields or launched ships across the wine-dark sea, there was a force older than men or war, the dominion of the gods. Their tales lay hidden behind the deeds of mortals, but it was the Olympians who wove fate's fabric. Before them was chaos. From it came Gaia, Uranus, Cronus, and the bloody birth of order. The age of Titans ended in thunder and fire. Zeus, youngest son of Cronus, rose up, freed his brothers from their father's gut, and hurled the Titans into Tartarus. In their place stood new rulers, the Olympians, 12 names, shifting with time. Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Demeter, Hestia, Athena, Apollo, Artemis, Ares, Aphrodite, Hephaestus, and Hermes.
On Olympus, they built a new order, not kinder than the old, but subtler, more tightly bound to the fates of mortals. Zeus ruled from his golden throne, thunderbolt in hand. His strength lay in alliances and oaths, in generosity toward the faithful and merciless vengeance upon traitors. He divided the world with his brothers, the sky for himself, the sea for Poseidon, and the underworld for Hades. Earth and Olympus belonged to them all. Around him, a new pantheon gathered. Hera, his sister and wife, goddess of marriage and birth, burned with jealousy and rage. Zeus knew no fidelity. His unions with goddesses, nymphs, and mortals brought forth children who reshaped the world. Heracles, Perseus, Helen, Minos, and many more. Hera pursued them with cold, relentless vengeance. Beside him stood Athena, born not from a womb, but from Zeus's own head. Fully armed, she became goddess of wisdom and just war. She favored cleverness over brute force and guided cities like Athens to prosperity. Her warfare was measured and precise, unlike Ares's blood-drunken frenzy. Apollo and Artemis, the twin children of Leto, carried both light and shadow. Apollo shone with prophecy, music, and healing. His Delphic oracle shaped kings and battles, yet he could unleash plague, as upon the Achaeans at Troy. Artemis, his sister, roamed the forests as mistress of beasts, punishing any who dared to trespass in her sacred groves. Demeter, goddess of the harvest, gifted fertility, yet her grief for her daughter Persephone, stolen by Hades, brought forth the turning of the seasons. Aphrodite, said to have risen from sea foam, ruled over love and desire. Her beauty drove both gods and mortals to madness. She bound hearts together in joy and ruin.
In Olympus she was wife to Hephaestus, the lame smith, yet gave herself to Ares, god of war. Together they embodied passion and chaos. Hermes, swift son of Zeus, was messenger, thief, and guide of souls. He crossed every boundary, from Olympus to Hades, from feast to battlefield. He was the god of roads and trickery, the eternal wanderer with a smile upon his lips. The Olympians were never distant. They interfered, chose favorites, wove wars with mortal hands. Unlike the Titans, they mirrored human nature on a divine scale. Their loves were reckless, their grudges eternal, their pride without limit. Cities raised temples in their honor, burned offerings for their favor. In every home, a fire was kept for Hestia, goddess of the hearth, quiet and gentle. And yet their power was never absolute. Oaths bound them, mortals deceived them, time itself wore them down. Even Zeus lived with a shadow of fear, that a son might one day overthrow him. For this he denied Thetis as a bride, giving her instead to the mortal Peleus, so their child Achilles would die young. In this the gods were like men. They feared loss and fought for thrones. Yet, for now, they ruled. Their names carved in marble, their deeds sung in verse, their symbols stamped on shields and coins. The age of heroes had passed, but the world still belonged to the Olympians. And yet, beyond the horizon, prophecies whispered. New gods were coming. Temples would one day fall silent, but Olympus still stood. The Olympians were mighty, but not without rivals. Even as temples to Zeus reached toward the heavens and Athena's wisdom lit the minds of cities, other gods walked the earth, darker, untamed, gods of wine and madness, of death and rebirth. Their names were not etched on public altars, but murmured in secret groves and caves lit by torches. Chief among them was Dionysus, the last to claim a seat on Olympus, and the only one who truly stood at the border between the divine and the wild. Dionysus was no ordinary god. His very birth defied nature and decency. He was the son of Zeus and the mortal princess Semele. When Hera deceived the girl into asking Zeus to reveal his true form, Semele was consumed in the blaze of his thunder. Yet Zeus snatched the unborn child from her ashes and sewed him into his own thigh. Months later, the child was born again, twice born, as mortals would call him. From that moment, Dionysus's path was unlike any god's before. He grew not on Olympus, but in far-off lands, among the nymphs of Nysa, in the caves of India, in the company of satyrs and maenads. He did not rule from a throne, but wandered with flute and vine, followed by a wild throng of frenzied devotees. Wherever he passed, vineyards blossomed, and reason faltered. Dionysus was not merely god of wine, but of change, of that sacred, fragile threshold where civilization meets chaos, where joy turns into ecstasy. He granted delight, yet drove to madness. In rapture, a mortal lost himself, became another. His arrival in Greece was not always welcomed. Cities mocked his rites, kings forbade his cult. One by one they paid the price. In Thebes, his mother's homeland, the young god appeared disguised as a stranger. His followers roused the city with drums and cries. King Pantheon, stern ruler, sought to crush the frenzy. He imprisoned Dionysus, mocked the rites, and even wished to spy on the women in the mountains. But the god lured him into the forest, dressed in a woman's robe. There, in the divine madness, his own mother Agave led the maenads who tore him apart.
Only when she returned with her son's head on a thyrsus did she awaken from the spell. From that day, Thebes bore the shadow of that lesson. Dionysus was as much god of theater as of intoxication, lord of mask and play, of truth hidden within deception. His festivals became the heart of Greek drama, where both comedy and tragedy were performed in his honor. Through masks and song, the Greeks gave shape to their fears and desires, too dangerous to name aloud. Worship of Dionysus was not adoration of power, but surrender to it. With him came mystery cults, religions of initiation, secrecy, and rebirth. Unlike the solemn sacrifices of Olympus, mysteries promised each initiate a personal revelation. In Eleusis, followers of Demeter and Persephone reenacted the daughter's descent and return from death's realm. The Orphics, disciples of the poet-mystic Orpheus, spoke of Dionysus as a god torn apart and reborn, whose suffering bore wisdom and whose rites freed souls from endless reincarnation. These hidden faiths did not reject Olympus, but lived beneath it, deeper and quieter. They offered hope where thunderous gods gave only law. They whispered of the soul's survival beyond death, beyond the body. Even Olympus began to crack. The gods quarreled with growing bitterness. Ares and Athena fought for the hearts of warriors. Apollo loved too often, too fatally. Hyacinthus, Daphne, Coronis left behind only death or transformation. Aphrodite, jealous and capricious, punished mortals for passions she herself had kindled. The gods grew more like men, proud, vengeful, wounded, and lost. In Dionysus, Olympus met its mirror and undoing. He was divine, yet lived as a wanderer. He gave joy, yet left madness. He toppled kings and lifted peasants. Most of all, he reshaped divinity itself. God ceased to be only distant and eternal. Through mysteries, through wine, song, and ecstasy, mortals could feel divinity breathing within themselves. And far away, beyond the wine-dark sea and marble columns, Rome was rising. The world was changing. And Olympus, with all its thunder and thrones, already felt the shifting wind at its peak.
To Oedipus it was foretold he would kill his father and wed his mother. His parents sought to outwit the prophecy, casting the child away. He himself fled the home he thought his own, seeking to avoid his fate, only to run straight into it. The oracle, as always, proved right. What doomed men was not prophecy itself, but their blindness in reading it. There were other oracles, too. In Dodona, where the rustling of sacred oaks revealed the will of Zeus. On Delos, where Leto bore Apollo and Artemis. At Ammon in Libya, and in countless lesser shrines, where through dreams, entrails of beasts, flight of birds, or flicker of flame, the unknowable spoke. On the eve of war, signs were sought before every battle, a flash of lightning, the caw of a raven, a sneeze at the wrong time. Everything had meaning. These were no trifles. They were warnings, messages from the gods. A commander who ignored them risked not just defeat, but divine wrath. Sacrifices were made before sea voyages, at births, at weddings. Priests studied the entrails of goats, the livers of bulls, reading in their wet, dark patterns the will of the divine. The art of interpreting signs became its own power. Seers like Calchas, who led the Greeks to Troy, or the blind Tiresias of Thebes, wielded influence equal to kings. Tiresias, above all, who had lived as both man and woman, who endured 7 generations, whose wisdom was unmatched, whose visions were often curses to those who sought them, Yet oracles and omens were not superstition, they reflected the Greeks' deeper truth. Mortals are not masters of their fate. However great the hero, however noble the blood, however steadfast the heart, the wheel of destiny turned on, and in its turning, all must be broken. The gift of prophecy was not power, but awareness, and awareness, arriving too late, was tragedy itself. Still, men sought prophecy. They climbed mountain paths to Delphi, bringing gold and goat blood, asking questions in trembling voices. For even if fate could not be changed, it could be faced. To know of a coming storm was not to stop it, but perhaps to die with eyes open. In this tension between knowledge and helplessness, between certainty and dread, the Greeks found meaning. Their stories were not of conquering fate, but of dignity within its bounds. Even gods gazed upon the loom of the fates, unable to cut the threads they despised. Hector knew he would fall, and still donned his armor. Achilles knew he would never return, and still sailed to Troy. Oedipus tried to flee and ran straight into doom. And still, the Pythia breathed the vapors from the earth's crack, whispering riddles. Her voice was the cold breath of a world that had already chosen. For the Greeks, death was not the end of story, but only the end of breath. Beyond it lay no heavenly reward, no hellfire, but the ancient underworld, where all must go, the great and the small, the virtuous and the vile. It was the realm of Hades, named for its silent sovereign. There was no fire, no pitchforks, no horned demons, yet the dread it inspired was so profound that mortals seldom dared speak his name aloud. Instead, they called him Pluto, the wealthy one, for all treasures of the earth, the veins of silver and gold, rose from beneath the soil, as did the dead. The map of the underworld was drawn not by reason, but by memory and myth. At its threshold flowed 5 rivers: Styx, river of hatred and sacred oaths; Acheron, river of sorrow; Phlegethon, river of fire; Cocytus, river of lamentation; and Lethe, river of forgetting. The dead arrived there as shadows, breathless and bloodless, stripped of voice and form. Charon ferried them across Acheron for a coin. Those left unburied, those without payment, wandered the banks for 100 years, whispering and weeping. At the gate stood Cerberus, the 3-headed hound, keeping the dead within and the living without. Beyond stretched the ashen meadows of Asphodel, where most souls drifted in oblivion, rustling like dry leaves. Yet not all destinies were alike. The judges of the dead, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus, weighed every soul. The truly wicked were hurled into Tartarus, a pit deeper than the prison of the Titans, where oath-breakers, murderers, and traitors suffered punishments that mirrored their crimes. Sisyphus strained against his stone. Tantalus thirsted beside unreachable water. Ixion spun upon his flaming wheel. Few, the worthy, found their way to Elysium, the green fields of eternal spring, where heroes rested, their memory and renown preserved. Rarer still were those who chose rebirth, who drank from Lethe, forgot their past, and began anew. In later mysteries, the soul might hope to break free from this circle altogether, rising to the stars. But such fates were rare and uncertain. At the center stood Hades himself, stern, silent, a king without vanity. He sought no worship, meddled not in mortal lives. He simply ruled, and ruled without rival. His kingdom did not change, and he wished it so. He was not evil, as later tales would paint him, but unyielding. indifferent, a shadow to Zeus's thunder and Poseidon's tide. Beside him stood Persephone, queen of the underworld, whose story revealed more clearly than any the Greeks' vision of death's double face. Persephone was the daughter of Demeter, goddess of the harvest. One spring, while gathering flowers, she was seized by Hades, who rose in his chariot from the sundered earth. In despair, Demeter halted the growth of all things. The land withered, rivers ran dry, famine swept through mankind. Neither prayer nor offering could soften her. She refused to let the earth bloom until her daughter was returned. At last, Zeus sent Hermes to fetch Persephone, but she had tasted the seeds of the pomegranate, 6, or perhaps only 1, and in doing so, bound herself to Hades. A compromise was struck, and it became the myth of the seasons. Part of the year Persephone dwelt below, and Demeter grieved, casting the world into cold. When she returned, the earth blossomed once more. Life and death became a cycle, not a sentence. In time, Persephone ceased to be a captive and grew into her role as queen, a mistress of mysteries who walked among the shades with quiet authority. In the rites of Eleusis, her descent and return were enacted each year, a promise not only of the grain's renewal, but of the soul's rebirth. The underworld was not wholly closed. A few mortals descended and returned. Orpheus, by song, charmed Cerberus, pleaded with Hades and Persephone, yet lost Eurydice when he looked back. Heracles dragged Cerberus into the light. Odysseus, guided by Circe, poured blood for the dead and summoned the shades of Tiresias, Achilles, Agamemnon. And all told him, death is not glorious, only final. Achilles, once the greatest of the Greeks, declared he would rather be a servant alive than a king among shadows. Thus the Greeks buried their dead with care, placing coins for Charon, weapons, wine, and song. They poured libations, made offerings at the hearth. For the dead were never gone entirely. They came in dreams, gave omens, and could be summoned by blood to answer questions best left unasked. The underworld was a mirror of life, of memory, of relentless justice. It offered no paradise for the virtuous, no hellfire for the damned. It simply was, vast and dark, ruled by a God who sought neither love nor prayers, only silence. In that stillness, the Greeks glimpsed eternity, and in the tales of Hades and Persephone, of shadows and judgment, of rivers and thrones beneath the earth, they gave death its place in the cosmos, not as punishment, but as passage. Even the gods were not immortal, not in memory, not in power, not in worship. The moment always came when the divine grew quiet, when bright figures faded from the edges of human dreams, and thrones once built on thunder were worn smooth by time. For the Olympians, that long fading began not with war or prophecy, but with Rome and a world weary of old stories. The Romans did not destroy the Greek gods. They embraced them, renamed them, wove their myths into Roman virtues and victories. Zeus became Jupiter, Hera, Juno, Poseidon, Neptune. It was a transformation, calculating, reverent. Rome honored Olympus, but reshaped its gods to match its ideals: order, hierarchy, empire. Zeus thundered not from a wild peak, but from the Capitol, draped as lawgiver. Dionysus became the cultivated Bacchus. Athena's fierce independence softened into Minerva's civic wisdom. In literature, the myths endured. Ovid, in the Metamorphoses, retold them in golden Latin, wry, graceful. Virgil, in the Aeneid, cast the gods as instruments of fate, guiding Rome's founding. But the change was plain. In Homer, gods strode the battlefield, burning with passion. In Roman tales, they became symbols, distant, politicized. No longer were they free to act at will. They became themes rather than presences. And as the empire widened, so too did acquaintance with foreign gods and faiths. From the east came Mithras, born of stone, slayer of the cosmic bull. From Egypt, Isis, mother of life and magic. From Judea, an unseen singular god who forbade images, rejected idols, and allowed no brothers, no thunder kings beside him. These cults did not merely compete with Olympus, they undermined the very fabric of Greek belief. The Olympians ruled by appetite and hierarchy. The newcomers promised morality, unity, salvation. At the same time, philosophy gnawed at the myths from within. Xenophanes mocked gods with human forms, saying that if oxen had gods, they would look like oxen. Plato admired myth's beauty but doubted its truth, insisting God should be perfect and good, not jealous and lustful as on Olympus. Epicurus admitted gods existed but denied they cared for mankind, declaring that fear of divine punishment was mere superstition. Even the Stoics sought divinity not in figures, but in reason, in the logos that governed all. And when the cult of emperors arose, when mortal rulers were proclaimed gods and given temples, the line between myth and politics grew thin. The ancient gods became symbols. Their shrines endured more for tradition than belief. Farmers still laid offerings to Demeter, and sailors still prayed to Poseidon. But fewer and fewer truly believed the gods walked among them. The flame on Olympus had not yet gone out, but it flickered low. Then came the final blow, not from a rival cult, but from a revolution of faith. Christianity, once a small, persecuted sect, spread across the empire. Its power came not by sword, but by word. Its God was unseen, singular, omnipotent. Its tale spoke not of lovers and vengeance, but of sin and salvation. In time, its temples rose where the old ones fell. Its hymns drowned out the lyres. Its priests denounced the Olympians as demons or fictions. By the reign of Theodosius I, pagan temples were closed by law, the Olympic Games abolished, sacrifice outlawed. The gods did not resist. There was no last battle between Zeus and Christ, no divine siege of Jerusalem or Rome. The Olympians simply faded like the final light of a long day. Their statues stood weathered and silent. Their altars went cold. Marble columns cracked, and ivy climbed where priests once stood. The myths endured, but now as literature, not faith. Children learned of Heracles in schools, not shrines. Artists painted Athena, but no longer prayed to her. Gods who once commanded storms and fates became stories, beautiful, strange, haunting. And still they survived. Even as their temples crumbled, they lived on in whispers, in poetry, in the architecture of the Western mind. They returned in Renaissance paintings, in Enlightenment philosophy, in romantic epics and modern retellings. They became archetypes of war and wisdom, of love and betrayal, of pride and glory. The Greeks had given them human faces, and in so doing, made them eternal in another way.
What is fate? What is love? What does it mean to be human? The modern age followed. Myth was no longer confined to classical study. It surfaced in literature, in cinema, in psychology, even in comics. Carl Jung saw the gods as archetypes of the human mind, forever reborn. James Joyce wove them into the streets of Dublin. Rick Riordan reimagined them for school children in Manhattan. In Marvel and DC, the gods strode again, not in robes and sandals, but in armor and spandex. And always, in the background,
The old tales remained, unchanged. Odysseus still sailed, Heracles still labored, Persephone still rose each spring. They were never forgotten, only translated, generation by generation, into new forms, new tongues, new dreams. For myth is not fixed, it is living memory, carried onward. What the Greeks gave us was not only a pantheon, but a framework, a way to explain the world, to wrestle with death, to honor beauty, to understand the self. Their gods were flawed, gloriously so. In them we saw not perfection, but possibility, the agony of choice, the thrill of risk, the wound of pride, the solace of ritual. They told us what we might become, and what we must fear. Even now, at a world of science and silence, the myths still murmur. You hear them in tales of chosen heroes, in fallen stars, in the slow return of the seasons. A maiden descends, and spring waits. A king defies prophecy, and loses all. A mother grieves the son. The faces change, but the truths remain. The gods may have left Olympus, but they never truly left us. Now they walk quietly, in books and songs, in dreams and memory, in every tale that dares to reach beyond the mortal veil. They are not dead, they have only moved. And now the story ends. The winds on Olympus are cold, the torches in Delphi are ash, but the myths remain. Good night.